Well, thank you, Steve, and thanks for everybody for being here. Take advantage of this opportunity. I am Rick Stowell, one of two Ricks in our department. I'm an extension specialist in animal environment. What that means is I focus on the environment that is provided to animals. In a hog barn, I look a lot at ventilation, stall design, things like that, and also the immediate environment around livestock facilities. So I get into some of the odor and gas emission type work. While that's coming up, I will also, I'm going to tell you who I am and who I am not. So my other part of my job is to teach classes in the Mechanized Systems Management program at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and also the Agricultural Engineering program there. And I will say that putting in a plug for UNL, I will also compliment Northeast Community College for working very well with the University of Nebraska and Lincoln, our College of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources, coming up with a 2+2 program. And I don't know all the details, but they work on that, I'm pretty sure annually, because we're always getting updates on that, making sure that students who choose to go to Northeast Community College and then decide later that they would like to pursue a 4-year degree can do so without having problems and having to take additional classes just to get in or just to graduate. So that coordination is really helpful. I also put in a plug for Northeast around 2010, is either 2010 or 2011. The University of Nebraska coordinated the North American Manure Expo. It's something that's held annually, and we held that in Nebraska here, and we chose to work with Northeast Community College to actually be the host of it. So it was hosted, that North American event with several hundred exhibitors was hosted here on the campus, and they did a great job at that. I'm also, a part of a team, and so who I am not is I'm not the manure management specialist at the University of Nebraska. We have 2 manure management extension specialists. Those would be Rick Kelsch, the other Rick here, and Amy Schmidt. They're extension specialists with expertise in manure management. I have some expertise, but I'm not the manure management specialist. And then Steve asked me to give a talk on the value of manure. He also had to say that I was the third choice. So I'm not going to talk as much about manure value. I'm going to talk more about siting, but I'm also going to show you some resources where you can learn about the value of manure. Highlight a couple other people here. So this is a statewide team, works on manure-related issues. Also point out Larry Howard, very capable extension educator in Cumming County, works primarily with livestock. And then Leslie Johnson has worked with our manure team for several years, and she works out of HAL, the Haskell Ag Lab in Concord, or out of her home. And also take the opportunity to highlight this website, manure.unl.edu. Really, just about any question you have on handling manure, managing manure, permitting, those kind of things, you can find on that website. To show you how much we think about that website, about 10 years ago, the university instructed us that they wanted to move all the websites into key areas. And so we listened when they said we needed to move all our manure-related material into the water.unl.edu website, but we did not listen when they said we needed to get rid of the manure.unl.edu URL, because when people have questions about manure, we want to be able to tell them, go to the manure.unl.edu site and you'll get there right away. So we civilly disobeyed our administrators at that point and kept that site. But another website I'm going to really focus on is called Ag Site Planner. So if you want to just put that in your cell phones, I was thinking I might walk you through some of these programs, but the technology is not convenient for that. So if anybody has any questions during the break, I could walk you through that. But I will show you some things. So this has a couple things. You're probably not going to be able to read the small fonts, but this says risk management tool. And the second one is regulatory guidance. And over here we have some critical questions for new operations. So this is something that Amy Schmidt, Dr. Schmidt, got some funding to develop. And basically it's pulling information from throughout the state. And so you can go in, and I'll show you a couple slides and talk about that more. But you can identify a site in Nebraska and then get a bunch of information about that site. And then along the top, again, the fonts are probably a little small to read, but there's a bunch of different things. One of those is nutrient management plans. And so you can access a lot of information from this one site. So just again, Ag Site Planner, if you Google search that, it'll come up top of the list on that. So this is an example. I just went in earlier this week and identified this. So this is up by, I think this is Stanton County. I just went in there and draw a box. You zoom in, and then it'll say, when you get zoomed in close enough that you can see the actual site, you can just there's a drawing tool that would be located up at the top center before you actually draw it on there. And you click on that, and then you draw the property you're interested in, locating your facility on, and you say go, and it'll come up with a bunch of information relative to that site. So it says down here, generating your report, and then it puts out several different reports. So one is just site information, how many acres is that, so you can confirm it should be real close to what you're told. And then some other information just geographically about the site. Some regulatory information, so it'll identify the locations of wells in the outlined property. Are there any impaired waterways or protected waterways? Because you'll have to have buffer in your nutrient management plan, not apply in those areas. Are there any other areas within or around your site that you need to be thinking of before you purchase or before you build on that site, on that property? And then there's some hydrological and soil things, just so you know what kind of soils are in that area, both from the cropping standpoint and from the building standpoint and the land application standpoint. So it's a really useful tool for early in the process. If you're especially somebody who's got a couple different properties, you might be thinking of buying or locating a facility on, you can kind of compare and see what the pros and cons of each of these locations might be. The other tool that was listed there is a regulatory assistance tool. And so when you go in there, I just entered in 2,000 head wean to finish building in Stanton County, I believe. And it comes up and tells me what the classification is going to be with DEQ. And you can go down through after that and figure out what your main requirements are going to be with DEQ, how they're going to look at that operation and classify that. So let's go back. I'm going to take a quick break here and see if there's any questions so far. Does anybody have any questions? All right. I'm going to next go on to the odor footprint tool. So this is one I'm a little more involved directly with. So the odor footprint tool has been around for 12, 15 years now in various forms. And currently it's mainly available as a worksheet or spreadsheet. And so several people, consultants in the room know how to use this tool. You can always call me or someone else at the university, and we'll be able to assist you with that. And but basically, you put in information about the facility, and the swine buildings is pretty, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but they're standard categories. And then at the bottom down here, there are different directions and different distances based on a risk level of how often do you want to keep the neighbors in a certain direction free of annoying odors. So part of the reasoning for this is we know there is no such thing as 100% odor free. I get asked a lot by some companies to verify that something is odor free. We know there's, no matter what you're talking about, there's not odor free. But on the other hand, we'll get a lot of neighbors who will say, well, this is going to smell all the time. And we can use science-based objective reasoning to come up and say, this is not going to smell all the time. And based on the distance and the direction that a facility is located away from neighbors, you can come up and say, we would expect 94 or 96 or 98% of the time you're not going to have to deal with odors. And so that puts some objectivity, puts some baseline information in there. So I got a couple different ways that we typically use this with producers. The first and probably most relevant way is early on. So most counties will have a setback. Platte County, for example, doesn't have zoning, so they don't have these setbacks firmly in place. But most counties will have a setback, and you'll have to meet that. You'll have to satisfy that. But just in terms of objectively thinking about the risk for neighbors in your area, a lot of times I will encourage folks to consider multiple sites on their property. A lot of times they'll come in and they'll have one place in mind for one reason or another, and we'll start off the conversation, is this the only place you're looking at? And try to get them to think about, are there other options that I should be weighing pros and cons of? So in this example, I'll start off by saying another good resource. So we've got the odor footprint tool, and another good resource would be the Department of Roads has in the state, for every county has these types of maps that you can download, and it'll show, so you can find your highways and your roads, and you can find the location of every documented residence and public building. And sometimes you talk with producers or prospective producers, and they've never really sat down, and they forget about the residence that's on the other side of the hill, just because they don't see it, right? Or maybe there's a tree line and they think there's two neighbors over there and there's actually three. And so by putting this down on paper or on a Google image, a satellite image, you make sure you're dealing with all the neighbors and you have distances correct and you can visualize it better. So this is just an example. Identified two locations. One maybe in the corner might be more ideal for that farmer. Get it in the corner of the site instead of in the middle. But from an odor perspective, we know in this part of the state, this time of year, we get a lot of wind from the southeast, more so than from the other directions. And so when we look at where that odor is more likely going to go, it's going to go in this direction, not so much in this direction. Very seldom get a north-northeast wind. It's usually associated with a storm event that comes and goes. And so there's more risk in terms of this footprint for different risk levels to the north and northwest of the site. And we could just have a conversation with the producer about, well, how important is it that the building goes there if we can drop a few more people out of potentially having odor issues by moving to a different site or relocating, adjusting things a little bit. So, any questions on the odor footprint tool? Oh, let me go through the other one and then I'll take questions. So the other application is to look at odor control technologies. Typically, I always encourage siting. Do your best job at siting, and then let's start looking at odor control technologies because they generally cost additional money. The example I'm going to use is a Nebraska pork producer. It's Walker Brothers. They're out in the Panhandle, so they're kind of isolated from the rest of the industry. And this facility is now a 2,000 head finishing facility near Scottsbluff. And because they were relatively close to Scottsbluff, they were required by the county in order to smooth the process of getting approved, they were required to put a biofilter in. And I'm not going to get into biofilters today, but that's one of the things for odor control. And so they put the biofilter in, make sure they could get approved, but they never knew what the value of that biofilter was. So they came back to me later and said, could we use the odor footprint tool to assess the value of the biofilter on our operation? So this footprint, I'll just go through. You might not be able to see it very well. It's the Panhandle, so it's more brown color instead of green. But their operation is right here, and then there's some dotted lines. This is a 1/4 mile, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, and a mile. And then the blue lines would be the odor footprint tool, a moderate risk of 94% odor annoyance free, and then a very low risk of 98% odor annoyance free. And so they didn't have to meet any target, but they weren't required to meet any target at this point. But they just said, you know, we are really the only significant swine operation in the Panhandle. We want to be sustainable for the long run. So we're going to try to, internally, we're going to try to satisfy 98% odor annoyance free for all of our operations. And so that would be this red line. And we went through, and you probably see some clumps of trees here. So each of these is a location of a residence. So they've got some residents here that were inside of that target. And so that was without the biofilters. And of course they put the biofilters in. And with the biofilters, if you ran the odor footprint tool, this is what that would look like. So now they really didn't have to worry about it from a setback standpoint, but they've satisfied the biofilter for them satisfies their own internal desire to get all the neighbors outside of that 98% odor annoyance free. So people have different reasons for looking at this type of information, and I know folks at AFAN and several of the vendors kind of utilize this tool in different ways. Ask questions early, take a look at things early, and it'll help smooth out your discussions with your neighbors. I find a lot of times just the fact that you're thinking about this goes a long way in terms of communicating with neighbors. If you're doing it at the last minute because you had to, that comes off totally differently. Okay, so just finish off with a few things. Well, anybody have any questions on the odor footprint tool? Yes?
So if someone wants to use this tool, who do they contact?
So the question is, if somebody wants to use the tool, who do they contact? If you're working with a consultant, that would be the first place to ask. Some of the consultants have been trained in this. Not a lot of training that goes on, but if you're, like anything, if you're only going to use it once, it'll seem like a lot of training. But so the consultants, ask them, and you could also ask AFAN, and they'll probably lead you to me. But so at the end of the day, you can always contact me also, or Amy or Rick Kelch. Other questions? All right, so just finish up with some, so I mentioned manure.unl.edu. If you go there, I encourage you to go there. You'll find a lot of resources on nutrient management. We've been putting a lot of resources lately on the value of manure. How do you quantify the value of the phosphorus, the nitrogen, the calcium, the micronutrients that are in there? And so I'm not going to go into that in depth. That's not my focus. But if you have questions, you can contact Rick Kelsch or Amy Schmidt or one of the local educators, and we've tried to develop a lot of resources to address those needs. It was brought up that there are documentation that is needed and things that need to be done for permits. One of those things that's required is if you're applying your own manure, or all manure applicators in the state have to go through training, land application training. So every year, University of Nebraska has land application training that we provide, and it's usually given at several sites locally, and we almost always have someplace up here in northeast Nebraska because of the need. And then it's also available online if you can't make that training on the dates that it's provided in person, or there's no convenient location for that. One of the things I will note is one of the most popular items that we provide is every year we come up with a calendar. So it's a physical calendar, and you can also use it electronically, but it's the real world. People are out there working with manure handling equipment, pumping pits. You don't want to have your laptop, or a lot of times you don't even want to use your cell phone for that. So we have one of the most popular things is just a pocket calendar. And so in there it's organized so that it's really easy to write down the conditions for the day when you're applying manure, how many tank loads were applied, how long did you pump, and then so that when you come back, because you need to do that on every monthly basis at most, or at least I should say, and if you're trying to remember that stuff 3-4 days later, it's harder to remember that. So land application training and some of those other resources, really good to check those out. I'm going to end here with just some comments about, from the value of manure perspective, we're doing a lot with fertilizer value, nutrient value, but we're also looking at soil health, because it's become pretty obvious to crop farms that applying manure as fertilizer has additional benefits to applying synthetic fertilizer. And it's hard to quantify, but we're starting to do as much as we can to quantify that. So there's things like water holding capacity, what's the biological activity in that soil, and so a big effort. Rick and Amy are spending a lot of time on the soil health area, and so I'd stay engaged with that. We're trying to come up with publicity and talking points to use with crop farmers, so livestock producers. What are the advantages of applying manure for soil health, and get that information out more broadly, and also some things for working with the community in terms of, a lot of times people in town think of manure as a hazardous waste. I mean, they'll use that kind of vocabulary, and we're really trying to change the vocabulary so that we're talking about, we're actually using something that's truly organic and is building up the soil rather than deteriorating the environment. And so I think I'll leave with that and see if there's any questions. All right, thank you.